talk to animals. My name is Shannon. I'm animal sensitive and intuitive and a Reiki master practitioner with animal love languages. And this is my supervisor. This is my nearly 23-year-old soul bird, Pearl Cuts. He never misses an episode, just mostly to just make sure his mommy stays on track, right? And today we have a special treat because we have Bruce Cuts, of not one but two escape fame, right? Instagram fame, right? Joining Miss Karen Cleveland this morning to chat about all things animal communication. Karen, I'm so grateful and glad to have you with us. Of course, yours was the schedule that was most disrupted a few months back when we had to stop everything and go on a wild hunt through suburbia to look for Bruce. And so this is our third try, which turned out to be a charm.
Yes.
So delighted to have you with us here on the podcast. For those of you who may be joining us, watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite streaming channel for the first time, we are here to talk about interspecies communication, to de-woo it, if you will, to demystify what it is, how it works, why it works, who can do it, and how you may already be communicating with your animal loves without even knowing it. And for those of you who want to dig a little deeper than what this podcast can offer, I've been so blessed with having such a glorious group of master communicators and teachers, and Karen Cleveland is one of those today. And so we'll be talking about, maybe getting you started by just experiencing animal communication through a session, but also perhaps taking a course, dipping your toe in, maybe jumping in to find out what this is all about and what's really possible when we cross species boundaries, right? We've got a little competition going for mommy's lap right now. so before we get any further, I want to make sure that I mention how people can reach you. It's Karen Cleveland and the Animals.
Yes. So I actually have two websites.
You have two? Okay.
Well, Karen Cleveland and the Animals was my original site when I started talking to animals professionally 10 years ago. And as I've moved into being a minister and into the more spiritual realm, I'm at, so the initials are for One Love Animal Connection. So it's OLACM.org, which is One Love Animal Connection Ministry.org, where I am blending animal communication and my spiritual pursuits. So,
oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So we'll be learning a little bit more about that as well. And I'll be sure to put the links in the show notes for those of you who may be listening while driving or cycling. We don't want you to have to stop and drop and write it down or try to memorize it, right? So it'll be in the show notes for you anytime you need it. So really, people are joining us from all walks of life. Some may be listening and they have some experience. Some may be listening and it's a curiosity. It's something interesting. So I always like to start at the beginning, and talk about what is animal communication? When did you, let's take us back to the beginning. When did you know that animal communication was even possible, even a thing that was accessible?
Well, yeah, that's kind of a weird thing because most of my life, it didn't even occur to me that it might be real. I mean, certainly I watched movies and, Dr. Dolittle and the horse Ed. Is that his name? Now I don't remember. But but all these things that they were pretty much like science fiction to me. They just, oh, that's interesting. And it wasn't until later, till I was an older adult that I started thinking about things. And my daughter, actually, one time, we used to have a dog. And my daughter at the time was a teenager. And I used to tell her and the other kids, hey, Buddy wants you to do this. Buddy wants you to do that, blah, blah, blah. And finally, my daughter stopped at one time and she looked at me and she goes, Mom, how do you know what Buddy wants? And I was like, what? How do you not know what Buddy wants? And so there was that. There were several experiences that happened, and I thought, well, is it possible? Am I? I don't know. Maybe I am. So yeah. So I started looking into it, but it wasn't, until my, I guess, early 40s maybe that I started actually paying attention to my relationship with animals.
That's a really important point for those of you who are listening or watching. It's not that it's not possible. It's not that it's not happening, perhaps. It's that our lives are noisy and busy. I mean, here you were,
Yeah.
a busy working mom with an interspecies family to care for. I wonder why you didn't ever have time to stop and think
Right.
about what was going on and how you knew. Maybe you just chalked it up to mommy instincts or whatever it was. And it's like,
Yeah.
don't be listening or watching today and thinking, oh, this is just something cool that I wish I could do or something cool that others can do. It's part of our birthright,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
it's actually, if we were still, I like to say, card carrying members of the greater food chain of life, it would be necessary for us to survive, not just from one day to the next, but from one meal to the next. We need to be able to tune in, not just with our heads, not just with our busy left brain, but with our bodies and with our senses in order to know what's safe, what's not, what's good, what should be avoided, and also learn from our mistakes in a very sensory way, not just looking into our heads for the data, but feeling in our bodies what when we're tuned in, what feels right, what doesn't feel
Right.
right. I love that you just accepted. I mean, Buddy must have just been having a blast in a family where he could communicate so freely, whether or not it was recognized and noted down or discussed. It was like he had a voice.
Right.
Amazing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Amazing. So, coming to it later in life doesn't necessarily, because I've met people that said, well, I was born knowing how to do this, and so I've never been trained. And it's not really about that. We're all born knowing how to do this. The training comes when we feel a call to tap in, to tune in on a more reliable basis, and we want to be able to serve others. We want to be able to serve. Not everybody is called to this. I mean, I'm turning 51 as of the well, in a couple. I guess by the time this airs, I will be 51. How about that? Something else to celebrate, right?
Yeah.
And so I came to this over the past year or so, and looking back now, I can see a paper trail,
Right.
and so does the
Right.
sensory paper trail. But you can come to it at any age, any stage of life, and you can come bearing gifts that you may not know that you already possess.
Hmm.
And it's, but not everybody feels this calling. It's just like I never felt a calling to become a tax accountant. Thank goodness. If anybody's seen my math scores from all the way from day one to day end, when I hired my CPA, nobody would want me to do that. And so it's not about pressure either to start down this path. It's just about knowing it's available and it's
Hmm.
there to support you and your interspecies family. So here you are with your daughter issuing your big wake up call
Yeah.
and kind of the bearer of good news, so to speak. So I'd love to hear a little more about your journey, and how did you kind of put some
Yeah.
structure around this so that you could start serving other interspecies families.
Yeah. Absolutely. I so there was that incident. I had also been listening. So I worked from home at the time. Even then, I was working for
Nice,
a company on the computer at home,
nice.
and I listened to a radio show by a pet psychic who isn't any longer around. But at the time, I um, I would listen to her and she would give answers to people and I would yell. I'd be home alone. I'd be like, that's not right. I could do better than that. That That's not
Making
right.
me
Why
laugh.
is she telling them that? And I started thinking, well, why do I think that's right? Because I mean, I don't know if it's right. Do I know if it's right? So I started looking around, and at the same time, I was looking at Reiki, and my sister and
Mhm.
I had been talking a little bit about taking some classes and some animal communication. And it's like, well, I don't know, maybe. So I did. I looked, I took a free class at a local bookstore. And I don't even remember the name of the person because it wasn't who it was supposed to be. They had to get a sub, and I don't know. Anyway, so I took this free class, and it's like, wow, this is possible. I don't know that I connected with an animal that night. I didn't feel like I did, but it was affirming enough that I looked for actual like classes, further classes.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So I got then into a program, and I worked with someone for a couple of years.
Okay.
Um, I and the thing is, once I started it, it just all felt right. It just all felt like I'd always known this. I mean, the first few times it was like, I don't know about this. But at some point, I think there's just a decision. It's like I can either do this or I can't. And it happened to evolve or um, occur around the same time I was on a spiritual journey with myself and finding a new church and all that kind of stuff. So it all kind of seemed to come together at the same time. But I tell people, if you want to do it, it just takes your desire to do it, just some guidance in what you're doing, some structure around it, like you said, and then practice, just practice.
Practice is very, very important, and because I've really been thinking about this. Is I mean, this podcast has given me the gift of being able to speak with so many
Mhm.
in the animal communication, interspecies family community, from many different walks of life with many different areas where they feel especially called or gifted towards, some work with lost animals. Some it's more
Mhm.
about being serving as a medical intuitive. For some, it's about pets in the afterlife. And you have this really uniquely wonderful. I see that I'm actually kind of visualizing the infinity symbol for some reason, and I'm loving your backdrop. It's like it's all I can do,
Okay.
to not be like staring into the camera, like what is that? Realizing we're on video too, right? And
Right.
you've got this beautiful intersection, this blending together of the spirit aspect and the relational aspect. It's like I'd love for you to share a little bit more about specifically your work and that twin flame calling, so to speak, and kind of very intrigued by your venture with, and I've already, because that's just the kind of short term memory I have. ILA.
Oh, it's OLACM, One
Oh,
Love Animal Connection.
right.
Yeah.
So, which
Yeah.
is, oh my, it just sings to my heart. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that is and what's unfolding for you.
Sure. And it's still unfolding for me. So I still say, okay, so what am I doing? How am I serving people? But it's all about connection with all life and with animals and with God. So the just that, as you know, we're all connected,
Wow.
and we just need to remember that. So what one of the things that I am doing right now is focusing on teaching people how they can transform their lives with the very same practices we learn to talk to animals with. So, what I call spiritual practices, some people call them mindfulness or mindsets, that kind of thing. Um, I discovered, so like I said, I was kind of doing both, kind of studying both at the same time, but my life sucked. I was, I mean, it had moments. It was
Keeping it
great, and then
honest.
it
Yeah,
sucked.
I can relate.
It
Yep.
it went up and down, and I was living in this very small rental house that my niece owned. I was getting the family discount. I was broke. I couldn't pay. I was figuring out how to take one bill to pay the other every month, that kind of thing. And I finally realized, because I was doing pretty good as an animal communicator as far as client satisfaction, right? So I understood those skills, and I finally figured out that I could apply those skills to my own life with my relationship with the universe. And so, for example, some of the things that we do as an animal, or at least as I do in my client sessions, things like grounding and centering ourselves and just making sure we're connected so we're honest and truthful with the animals, is me doing that with God and the universe. So, like meditation and contemplation and such, or or being aware of the words that we're using and the expectations behind those words. So making sure, if I'm telling an animal or I'm communicating, so if I'm talking to an animal, there's pictures going back and forth, which are created by the words that we say. And we want making sure always saying the words the way we want them and not don't want them, which is true in life too. So making sure I'm not saying I want, I don't know, something silly. I'm not saying I want to make $1 million, but then telling myself I could never make $1 million because I don't even know how to do that, right? So, because the animals pick up on that as well. And things like visualizations, even like how we tell animals in a session to do something, like what's the expected behavior that we want to use the litter box, as opposed to saying what we don't want, like don't potty on the carpet. So telling God and the universe, I don't want to be poor. Well, that's like saying focusing on the poor. So, anyways, I realized once I started applying all these same principles to my own life and back and forth. I mean, like you said, I guess it is like the infinity symbol, because the more uh, and the more you trust one, the more I began to trust the other. So, so becoming more connected with my God led me to be better connected with the animals, and the better I became with the animals, the better my relationship with God and the universe became. So that's really what I'm trying to help others do, is maybe they don't want to be an animal communicator for life,
Right.
for a profession, and maybe they do, but if they love animals, so I specifically reach out to animal lovers who do want a deeper connection, at least with their own pets, if not all animals, and also want that spiritual aspect of it. So
What a
it's
beautiful
evolving.
gift. What a
Yeah.
beautiful gift, and it's my heart is especially moved, which is why I was so persistent reconnecting with you every time Bruce would go missing again and we have to reschedule. I feel like there's still what I call the woo factor with animal communication. It's like it gets blended in with a whole host of other disciplines that, depending on what type of faith background that you may have or what type of, let's say, religious upbringing, there can be a lot of shame and a lot of guilt that's kind of placed on a person who feels this awakening to connect with animals and to be able to dialogue back and forth, and if that is even permitted, if it is okay, if it's something you have to keep in the closet, so to speak, not let your community know. Not everybody, people are scared of, and yet there are so many beautiful, I was raised Methodist Christian and now I consider myself spirited. It's very open because I don't know. And the more I live in that, I don't know anything, let God lead, just like letting the animals lead. The more I learn and the less I know, and the more my life flows and the more open I am to receiving divine guidance. And that works really well for me. To not put any labels on things and not to assume that one calling is okay with God and one calling is not, or to assume that there's something dark in a place where it feels very light.
Hmm.
There's so many beautiful stories across faith traditions, and certainly in the Bible growing up, of humans working actively to care for animals, animals responding, animal partnerships. There are also less lovely stories about animal sacrifices and things that I can't imagine. But I mean, it's just, I think the best way to sum it up is it's complicated,
Yeah.
and trying to apply a black or white label to an awakening soul is very short-sighted. It's unfair, and it's life limiting, because we don't know. I mean, that's part of what it means to feel connected on this universal level, is that blows the mind wide open.
Right.
And so I'd be curious to hear, if there's anybody listening today who is kind of in the closet with, what's going on. Maybe they're the one today who's listening to that radio station and saying, oh no, I know what, Freddie wants to say to mom or dad or
Right.
whoever. Um, you know, Taking those first steps and honoring yourself, and honoring the stirring in your soul that's saying this is possible, and that
Yeah.
it's needed.
Yes.
What guidance would you, not to put you on the spot, but what guidance
Oh,
maybe might you have to offer?
yeah. Well, I was raised Catholic. My
Yeah.
dad was a Catholic deacon,
Okay.
and my mom still, goes to church. Most of my family, not my personal siblings, but the
Uh-huh.
extended family, is all Catholic. So it was nothing we talked about. It was something I wanted to hide from my aunts and such for a while. My mom, just doesn't get it. So a lot of people
Honest,
just don't understand
yeah.
it. Yeah, but I think it's a matter of listening to your soul. So the pictures I have in the background for those that are listening are actually Bible pictures. So one is Adam and Eve in the garden, and one is the
Birth of Jesus.
yes, thank you.
Well, you're not looking at them right now, right? And you're having to
Yeah,
juxtapose right and left
yeah,
backwards. So,
and yeah, and but to me, it's all about the animals. I actually also have Saint Francis that you can't see,
mhm.
and as I started looking at the Bible, there's a lot of animal stories, and I believe that the whole birth of Christ is more about the animals helping us birth our Christ consciousness,
Yeah, that's
which
gorgeous.
and I believe that some of the animals are there to help us with this new consciousness. And I could actually get into a bunch of Bible stories and how I interpret them differently with um, one life in mind and animals in mind. But I know it's hard, and if you have to study for a while in the closet until your soul gets so filled that you just can't be contained anymore. So there was a point. It's just like I don't care. Actually, someone else told me one time, you'll just do it until you can't anymore, and then you'll change. So that's kind of what I believe. It's like, yeah, you do it until you can't do it anymore, and then there comes a point that what your heart says, what your soul says, because it's going to keep at you.
Yeah.
It's not going to let it go. It's going to keep at you until you finally decide to let it out, so to
Yeah.
speak.
To let it out, right? Well,
Yeah.
animals are, because they are so in their sensory bodies, and which means they're so in their hearts. I have experienced animals being the most profound, unconditionally loving teachers in
Oh
my
yeah.
life. And when I'm feeling unconditional love and I'm feeling that connection, I can't really tell the difference, but I don't really need a label. It's like, oh, is that God? Is it this? Is it spirit? Is
Right.
it nature?
Right.
Is it? It is, and it's a calling. Anytime we feel more love, um, that's a good direction to move in,
Yes.
and to
Yes.
just be curious, be brave, and and maybe when there's this much love here, maybe it might even be safe to assume there could be even more love on down the line. And again, when we're talking about beliefs, it's like a belief for one person, when I say I believe, when you say you believe, you're also sharing the experiences that you've had that are forming the words that are coming out of your mouth. And you're saying, I believe. It's, I hear, what I hear is, I've experienced this. This is a calling in my soul. This is a movement in my life. This is a whole being experience in my body. It's in my mind, but it has to kind of filter up, and which means we have to be open. And so, there's a lot of, it feels like there's a lot of fear-based reactions for people that have had particularly strict or rigid upbringings, where it's like, I believe it, that's like it's like inviting someone to a debate, well, but I believe, and it's like, well, that's fine. What you believe is what you've experienced, and what you felt, and what is making sense to you right now. But we're all different.
Right.
It's like those hair commercials where everybody comes out and they all look exactly the same. They have the same color hair, and then everybody takes their wig off, and it's like, oh, it's just so much more interesting this way. And I mean, there's so much diversity. I was not sure, for this, again, for those of you who are listening, you can't see this beautiful image. I wasn't sure if it was Noah and the Ark, or if it was the Garden of Eden, but there's just so much color and so much diversity and so much life. And so much adventure, and it's like, it just draws you in, where you're like, oh, I want to go check this out. I want to see this. I want to feel this. I want to experience this for myself. So speaking of which, arrived, we kind of arrived at the point where let's talk a little bit about somebody. It feels to me like you would be a particularly wonderful guide and mentor and teacher for somebody who's maybe listening and wrestling with some of these issues. So, let's say somebody would like to have an experience, somebody would like some validation or a safe space to talk about some of their experiences. What types of programs and courses might you recommend for someone who's not to borrow the term too liberally, but coming out of the closet and kind of trying to make a little bit more sense, if you will, of this feeling this thing that won't leave them alone, like you said.
Right. Well, I have to tell you, it took me a while to find a church that I liked. So I was searching for a church, and I started going back to the Catholic, and that didn't feel right. So depending on where you are, I do believe in looking for spiritual communities that feel good to you, and it it can mean anything. So mine is what we call religious science, or Center for Spiritual Living, and Unity is similar, and Universal Unitarians are somewhat similar. But and I have a community online that we meet twice a month. We do animal communication, but I also include the spiritual aspect, because, like I said, it's important to me. And and if it's not important to them, they probably wouldn't be there.
Right.
My group probably wouldn't be there with me. They'd be with someone else. But so I think, you know, there are spiritual sessions you can do. What I personally offer, is I have a free class that I do about once a week that involves the two. It's, how animal communication works and how it can help you change your life, basically. So I just cover the basics. It's super fast. But then I also have longer classes. I have some day-long classes. I have a digital class, which doesn't have the personal feel. So, some people want that.
Yeah.
But I do, yeah, if people are on Facebook, there's Facebook groups, meetups. It's really an interesting time that we're not able to meet in person so much, but yet with the Zoom capability, or the Facebook Lives, or whatever it is, there is a way to connect with others that have similar interests. So I'm sure the people that are listening to your podcast, for example, they love animals.
Right. Otherwise, they'd be listening to, how to trim 10% off your taxes, or,
Exactly.
fit your way to success, or whatever.
Right. And I am happy to talk with people to help them with their journey. And if I'm not the right fit, I have no problem. I know a lot of people
Yeah.
that are different than me,
Yeah.
but they're still very good. They're still like me
Yeah.
in a way. So yeah, I try to advertise everything that I do on my OLACM
Okay.
website.org
Okay.
website, and I know that's kind of hard to remember, but
I'll put
Karen
it in the show
Peterson
notes.
and the animals.com also gets you to the same place
Gotcha.
eventually.
Gotcha. And that's an important point, because it's like, you know, anyone who's listening to this who does have that interest, that curiosity, that maybe even that passion to take it 1 or 10 steps further, we're moving into, it feels like our whole planet, our consciousness, if you will, our connectivity is kind of like, along with the wiring of the planet, with high speed internet, somehow our wiring is
Yeah,
changing to match that. And
yeah,
so, we're moving out of a mentality of competition and
right,
scarcity, and feeling
right.
like, oh, look, there's so many animal communicators out there doing this already. There couldn't possibly be any room for me. Or I'm late to the party. And this whole outdated mindset, which one of my teachers calls camp scarcity,
Yeah.
which I think is a perfectly adept way to describe it. Sorry, I've got a little squirmy worm here in my lap. I'm trying you just really want to emphasize that point, don't you? Really want to emphasize this point. He says, there's enough animals for all of you out there. There's enough animals. Trust me, there's enough animals. And that is really true. Just go look
Yeah,
on the Humane Society
yeah,
statistics, how many animals are living in shelters right now that don't even have homes. There's so many applications. And you touched on this, there's so many different communicators with different focus,
right,
different
right.
life experience, different background. Not only are there enough teachers, mentors, and guides for each person who feels called to this new evolving interspecies consciousness, where we're more alike than different, despite what we may look like on the outside. There
Hmm.
are also more than enough animals and people who aren't going to feel called to do anything, formal in this
Exactly.
way, that need you and need your services. So understand, if this is something that keeps drawing you in, or if you're still listening to our podcast today, consider that there's a place for you. There's
Hmm.
definitely space for you, and there's a need for what only you have to offer. And whether you come and you work with me, whether you come and you work with Karen, whether you come and work with somebody else that you've heard on the podcast, or another guest that we have coming up, or somebody that none of us even know that resonates with you, the important thing is to give yourself permission to explore. The thing that I always like to share, kind of in closing, is that the very first time I connected with an animal, as part of my commitment to start learning this and practicing, it was an iguana, which delighted me because I have such a passion for it. That's kind of my thing. I have a real passion for so-called exotic species, and this is the silent majority that are, incredibly vulnerable and actually inching towards extinction every single minute of every single day. And I just remember thinking, everyone can do this. I mean, talk about confidence from somebody who's connected for 15 minutes with one iguana. And all of a sudden, but where did that come from? It came from the fact that I felt parts of myself turning on that I didn't even know were there. And guys, I've had 5 decades on this planet. I've had plenty of time to explore my operating system. And it was like it was a whole zip file I hadn't even accessed, didn't even know it was there. It had a weird label. I wasn't sure. Maybe just don't touch that. It might be a part of the security files or something. No, it's like, for no other reason than to never, like, as one of my teachers, Sonia Choquette, talks about, she says, never assume you know anybody, including yourself.
Mm,
And maybe that's a good place to start.
yes.
you
Yes.
know so, Karen, it has been such a delight and an honor to connect with you today. I am inspired by your unique calling and even more so by your commitment to allowing it to evolve and unfold.
Yes, well, thank you.
That's a huge part of it. And sometimes I feel like we don't do enough allowing in our lives. We don't do
Amen.
enough, with just saying, you show me what you've got. You show me, and okay, if it takes some time, so very blessed and very, very grateful to be a part of your world, and grateful that you've decided to join in with what we're doing here at Let's Talk to Animals as well.
Well, thank you.
Yes,
It's been
absolutely.
a pleasure being here.
Oh, a delight. And so I'll put all of the links in the show notes, and we'll be stay tuned every week. We have a new guest. If you would like to hear from someone that I haven't connected with yet, please let me know and I will do my utmost. You can find us at animallovelanguages.com/podcast. And lots of fun, free tools and interviews. And I think most importantly, you can find these guys along with my Redfoot tortoise Malty. You can find Pearl and our escape artist Bruce and Malty the Redfoot, and of course me after that. And we look forward to being with you again very, very soon. Take good care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.